Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, with all that has happened, with most Jews not going to synagogue throughout the year, Yom Kippur seems to be a day that still remains embedded in Jewish consciousness, the holiest day of the year. But ask yourself, why is it the holiest day of the year? Is it random? Could it have been another day of the year? What happened to Yom Kippur that makes it such a holy day? And we fast, and we wear white, Day of Atonement, Day of Forgiveness. What makes it such a holy day? So the answer is actually a little history lesson, very brief. What happened to Yom Kippur? So after the Jewish people stood at Sinai and received the Torah, so we know that 39 days later, Moses was up on the mountain studying with God. The Jewish people decided to build a golden calf. They gave up. They thought Moses wasn't returning. However, it's explained. Bottom line is they betrayed God. They heard at Sinai, the second of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not have false gods. Thou shalt not serve other gods. And that's exactly what they did. They built a golden calf and they worshipped it. One of the gravest sins, avodah zarah, idolatry. Moses comes down from the mountain. We know the story. He sees what they did. After you just stood at such a revelation. And what happens? He shatters the tablets. People think that was out of anger or out of lack of control. No, it was very deliberate, actually. Rashi, the great commentary, explains he tore up the ketubah, the marriage contract, because he could go back to God and say, look, it's true they sinned, but they never signed the dotted line. They never received the tablets. They were shattered. And that's indeed what he did. He demanded from the Jews accountability, but he marched back up on the mountain and for 40 days and 40 nights prayed for forgiveness. And he was not successful. We're told he was not successful. But he went up another time, another 40 days. On the first day of Elul, Rosh Chodesh Elul, he went up the third time on the mountain. The first 40 days he received the Torah. The second 40 days he was rejected. And the third set of 40 days, when does it conclude? On Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, Moses was finally successful in prevailing over God to forgive the people. That's why, right after Kol Nidre, Yom Kippur night, what do we say? God said, Salachti kidvarecha. I forgive them as you have asked me to do. If you think about it, it's mind-boggling. A man of flesh and blood, Moses, stood up to God, would not take no for an answer, kept knocking on the door, and finally God gave in and forgave the people. So, in short, Yom Kippur is the birth of hope, is the birth of forgiveness. Imagine life without hope. Imagine life without forgiveness. We're all human beings, is what Moses, paraphrasing what Moses said to God. We're human beings. We're flawed. Nobody is perfect. So they made a mistake. It was a deliberate mistake. They deserve to be called on it. I'm not denying that. But you can't tell me that you're closing the door, because if that's the case, human beings are always going to make mistakes. You need to tell me that if we work hard enough, we can regain your favor. So basically, it's the story of love betrayed, and then reconciliation. So Yom Kippur gives us the greatest gift of all, the gift that no matter what happens in life, even if there's a breach, even if there's a betrayal, even if there's an infidelity and a violation, we always can find a ray of hope. On Yom Kippur, the door opens up that yes, if you apply yourself and you initiate and you do what you have to do, I will open up a door for you that everybody can correct past mistakes. Again, think of life if there was no such hope. Then we're damaged goods. There's nowhere to go. That's why Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. Because you see, trust is not built on perfection. It's built on accountability. And Yom Kippur, we show we're accountable, and God responds and says, I will then open up the door. And yes, we can find the love that we always had, even though it may have been hurt, there may have been a schism was built, it was a breach of trust, but we can rebuild. So Yom Kippur is that holiest day of the year. Moses gave us a gift that's an eternal gift, that no matter what happens in life, there's always the ability to correct, to repair. I use this personally, frankly, in counseling couples, individuals, many people who've suffered great traumas in their lives, individually or in families or in marriage and so on. This story of Yom Kippur, to me, is the story of all healing and all recovery, that there's hope. No matter what happened, do not think that the damage is so severe that you cannot fix it. It may be hard work, but everything is fixable. Yom Kippur essentially is saying there's no such thing as impossible. That's why it's such a powerful, powerful holy day.
That's great. So now we're going to turn to some of the prayers. So on the first night, Kol Nidre, if you could give some insight to that.
Yes, so I have to tell you, Kol Nidre always bothered me. When I was a little child, I used to always ask my father and my teachers and everybody, what is this? Why do we start the holiest day of the year with this odd, bizarre prayer? It's beautiful, haunting melody. It goes back, they say, hundreds of years. I don't know how long back. We all know Kol Nidre sound. Kol Nidre, as you probably know from a trivia point of view, is the first song sung in Hollywood. Basically, the first movie, Soundy, you have Al Jolson singing Kol Nidre in The Jazz Singer. I always thought it was a Jewish conspiracy that they stuck into the movies. The first song of all is going to be Kol Nidre. Interesting. But Kol Nidre is very much part of our liturgy, part of our history, part of our tradition. But if you look at the words, you start asking yourself, it's like a very strange prayer. It's only about vows and oaths and promises that we're absolving ourselves of all our oaths and all the promises, and in almost like 10 different ways. It's essentially like a legal statement that I am freeing myself from all the promises I've made. That's the beginning of Yom Kippur. Why would that be the opening prayer? And then I realized that when you start reading the Hebrew, you realize the Hebrew and the English doesn't do full justice to the Hebrew prayer. The words for nidre, neder means to be bound to something. Yes, it's an oath. When you make an oath, you take a vow, you're bound by your word to the promise you made. But it's much deeper than just the words you said. There's being bound to something. If Yom Kippur is going to be the birth of hope and forgiveness, the first thing we need to do is untie ourselves of all the things that trap us, our fears, our insecurities, everything that binds us. So what Yom Kippur is really saying, Kol Nidre is really saying as we open Yom Kippur, that before we go into this holy day, or as we enter the holy day, the first thing is you have to free yourself of your old baggage. That you want to come like a newborn child, clean. And Kol Nidre essentially is absolving ourselves of all those commitments. We're not talking about healthy commitments. All the unhealthy commitments, the addictions, the things that keep us trapped, the things that limit us, the inhibitions, the fears, the insecurities, everything that doesn't allow us to really experience something new. The famous cliche, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Or as they say in healing, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Kol Nidre is essentially the mindset is that I am ready for change, but I have to free myself. If you're going to say, I want change, but you're not ready to open a window for fresh air, you can't, how are you going to get that change? So like another way of putting it is if you thought what you thought and you speak and you say what you said and you do what you did, you're going to have what you had. That's a mathematical certainty. So Kol Nidre is saying, I'm going to think a bit differently. I'm going to speak differently. I'm going to do something different. You're unbinding yourself from the vows and the oaths and the promises and all the things that trap us and limit us from being able to experiencing something new. That is the Kol Nidre prayer. And then we say, as I mentioned before, that God has forgiven us. And then begins the rest of the prayer that opens us up to the whole Yom Kippur experience. Want to continue through the prayers, right?
Yeah. So the next one would be 13 attributes.
The 13 attributes. Okay. So what happened on the mountain when Moses finally prevailed over God and said, God said, I'll give you forgiveness. So it's a very interesting chapter. It's in the book of Exodus, where it talks about this very intimate conversation between God and Moses and God, and Moses keeps on pushing and beseeching and pleading. And God finally says to him, okay, I see you're sincere. I see your depth, your love for the people. I see you're ready to give your life for them. Because remember, Moses had also said to God, erase my name from the Torah if you don't forgive them. So God saw that Moses was real. He was ready to sacrifice himself. So you know what he says? God says, what happens when you call to a father? We talked about a father. Compassion. A tremendous amount of empathy came out of God. However, we explain that on a metaphysical level, but an empathy. And that is called that God revealed to Moses the 13 attributes of divine compassion, what we call Yud Gimel Midos Harachamim. And on Yom Kippur, indeed, I haven't counted, I should have counted, but we repeat that countless times, many, many times through the prayers, especially in the fifth last prayer. The fifth prayer, the end of the day of Yom Kippur, in the Ilah, in the fifth prayer, we keep repeating. It says, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun. It's usually sung in the service. And what is that emphasizing? That God revealed to Moses 13 different types of empathy. You know, we usually think of empathy as one-dimensional. I have empathy for you, which is beautiful, compassion. But 13 different ways of empathy God revealed to Moses and says, this is the secret. These are the tools. And it was also a message that you now show that empathy to each other as well. Remember, this isn't just about God showing us empathy, it's also showing empathy to each other. You know, today there's recent discoveries in science about the concept of mirror neurons. I'm sure you've heard of mirror neurons, which is essentially empathy. The classic example is if you see, God forbid, a door about to slam on someone's finger, even though it's not your finger, you'll say ouch, you'll cringe. Why? Because we identify with another person's pain. So it's called mirror neurons, that the neurons mirror each other. And that's why a smile has an effect on someone else, or a scowl, the same thing, because there's something invisible, some energy that we share, that we project, and that we communicate with each other even without words. So the basic concept is that empathy generates empathy. So that's essentially why Yom Kippur, which is all about forgiveness, about kindness and empathy, is saying that yes, you may have wronged me, and maybe you deserve to be a retribution, but I still have empathy. Empathy saying that, you know, to err is human, but to forgive is divine. It means going beyond our comfort zone. And even if someone may have hurt us, we say, you know what, I'm going to rise above that, and I'll allow myself to open up the door of my own empathy. And in turn, that's what God does. So Yom Kippur is all about that. And that's why these 13 attributes. If we had more time, I can go through the actual 13. I have some of it in my book, 60 Days, in the prayer section in the back, what each of the 13 are. It's really fascinating study of human compassion, human empathy, and of course, divine compassion and empathy. Okay.
That's great. So I have to say, in your book, you show the structure of Yom Kippur. And I wrote an article for the Jewish Week, was one of the most popular articles about how you look at the structure and how Nila is just so unique. And I put up the slide here, but if you could speak to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the fascinating things that lies sometimes a story behind the story, you know, you call it under the hood, behind the curtain, is that the prayers and the Jewish traditions have so many rich layers that many of us may not be familiar with completely. And frankly, none of us are familiar with all of them. I'm constantly learning all the time about new dimensions. But I think when you look at the prayer structure, in Judaism, you discover something unbelievable and very personal. So technically speaking, we know that there are 3 prayers, daily prayers, called Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. The morning prayer, the afternoon prayer, and the evening prayer. That's on a daily basis. On Shabbat and holidays, we add a 4th prayer. It's called Musaf, which actually means an additional prayer. After the Shachrit, after the morning prayer, there's yet another prayer after the reading of the Torah, both on Shabbos and holidays. But there's one day a year that we have 5 prayers, Yom Kippur. the addition to Ma'ariv, the evening prayer, which is where Kol Nidre begins. In addition, in the morning prayer, the Musaf, and then Mincha, the afternoon prayer, there's one additional prayer. It's called Ne'ilah. What we call the gates are all open right before they close. And Ne'ilah is usually prayed right before sundown. And then from there we go into the close of the holiday. So this isn't just random 3, 4, 5. It actually reflects the essence of what prayer is. We know the essence of prayer is? Prayer is like a ladder. You all know the story of Jacob's dream. So Jacob had a dream where he saw a ladder standing on the ground, reaching up to the heavens. And angels were going down and up on this ladder. Or up and down on the ladder, actually. So the Zohar tells us, as well as other books, other Torah sources, that this ladder is the ladder of prayer. Prayer is a ladder of the human being on earth, reaching upward to heaven. When you pray, what are you doing? You're crying out for your needs, for blessings, for anything that is important in your life, and you're creating a bridge, an interface between heaven and earth, between spirit and matter, between the divine and the human. So the ladder has different stages, and they reflect the 5 different stages of the soul, which is on Yom Kippur. And there are the 5, and I'll name them, I'll enumerate them, that there's 5 dimensions to a person's soul. The first is called nefesh. It's biological life. The fact that the soul gives us life and that we're biologically or medically defined as being alive. The second stage is called ruach. Ruach is emotional life. The third is neshama, intellectual life. The fourth is called chaya, which is called transcendent life. And the fifth, yechida, means oneness, a singularity, a total seamlessness between object and subject, where we completely get absorbed in a reality greater than ourselves. So throughout the year, we can access on our conscious faculties, we can access the nefesh, ruach, neshama, the biological, emotional, and intellectual parts of the soul. On Shabbat and holidays, because of their special qualities, we can access one more dimension, the chaya, the transcendent, which is a little above the conscious. It's more what we call supraconscious. But only once a year, that day of forgiveness, that day of atonement, the day where God opens all the doors for hope and renewal and everything that we've discussed, you add the 5th prayer, that in this prayer, everything is possible. So the truth is, we always have these 5 dimensions, but they're not so easy to access. Yechida, the 5th, is like the essence of the person, where you're able to reach the deepest part of who you are. Like, when a person really loves somebody, and there was a betrayal or there was a violation or something, so how's the only way to reconcile? You have to dig deeper, and you have to find a part of yourself that was not part of the crime, so to speak. And that's reaching into the yechida. It's called yechida, the oneness, the unity, the singularity that we connect. And that's why by Ne'ilah, at the end of Ne'ilah, we say Shema. And we say Baruch Shem 3 times. And then we say Hava Hashem Hu Elokim 7 times. Because what we're doing there is connecting on the most essential and the deepest possible level. And that is the 5th dimension. So psychologically speaking, each of these 5 levels has their own particular personality, and the prayers of Yom Kippur, when you study them, you'll see each one fits the different levels of the journey of the soul on this very soulful spiritual day called Yom Kippur. We're traveling like on a ladder from level 1 of the soul to prayer 2, and level 2 to prayer 3 to prayer 4, and finally to the 5th level, the deepest possible level. And it has to go in an orderly fashion, obviously. You can't jump to the top of the ladder without climbing the lower rungs. So that's a brief summary of the Yom Kippur structure. And it's also fascinating because when you do say the prayers, you can actually identify, and you'll see how the prayers do correspond to these 4 different type of spiritual experiences.
In your book, this was probably one of the more transformational kind of areas where it really does build, and people who read the book can really get a better appreciation of the holiday. And then you touched on Shema. Do you have anything else you want? I mean, it's clearly at the end, like what?
Yeah, Shema is We know Shema is probably the most famous and fundamental prayer. I mentioned it before, the story with the children during the Holocaust and so on. Remember, the key word in Shema is the final word in it, the last word, echad. Echad. Echad means oneness, unity. It's interesting because for us, we always said that prayer. But today, especially we talk about science and technology, in one word, you ask any scientist, what is the search of science? Science is the search for unity, to find that one unifying principle that connects all the fragments of existence. That's what scientific law is about. Look at communications. The fact here, we're sitting on a Zoom, you can be anywhere on this earth, or maybe even in different planets, and we can sit here and talk together. Communication, the essence of technology in communications, is essentially transcending time and space. So the search for unity, if you think about it, is really the search of the entire human race from the beginning of time. And it's all captured, interestingly, in this one-line prayer. Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, that there's a unity, an intrinsic and unity that connects everything. In the words of physics, it is that even though we have many details, there's like an invisible quilt that connects everything in existence. Everything is connected. It's an illusion to think of the world as fragmented pieces. To the naked eye, it seems fragmented. So when we say Shema, we're really addressing a fundamental principle, the idea that everything really is connected with each other. Now, if you think about it, of the implications of that in our own personal lives, ask yourself, sometimes we feel our lives are fragmented. You know, you're being tugged in so many directions. Family responsibilities, work responsibilities, friends, social pressures, demands, expectations. Sometimes you feel literally like you're split into 100 pieces, or even more than that. So comes the Shema and says, no, find that unifying hub. I mentioned before, Rosh Hashanah, the idea of mission, that one mission that connects the dots, that connects it all, that creates an integration. And the way we understand that is that if you think of your life, that you're here to serve, you're here to serve God, you're here to serve higher purpose, you're here to serve others, that permeates all the details of your life. When do details become so demanding is when you don't see the way they're all connected. But when you understand that they're all being driven toward one higher purpose, you suddenly experience something called harmony. And look, the fact of the matter is that human beings abhor chaos. You come to your home and the whole house is a mess. There's something that's very grating. Even little children, give them different objects with different shapes and sizes, they'll fit the squares in the squares, the circles in the circles, the spheres in the spheres.
Oh, I muted him. He's muted. Shit.
Rabbi, I think you went on mute.
Yeah, he went. He's.
Where'd you lose me?
Like about 30 seconds ago, we just lost you.
Okay, so I was saying that look at human beings, fragmentation is something that we're abhorred by. Look, children, what do children naturally do? They will fit a circle in a circle, give them objects of different shapes. They'll fit the shapes each in their proper place because we gravitate toward connecting things, which brings me to one most important point. The word for echad is the gematria, the same equivalent as the word ahava, love. Human beings thrive on connections, on attachment. 9 months we spend in our mother's womb, completely submerged, protected in the embryonic fluids of our mother. Even young children in a healthy environment are constantly nurtured. We thrive on attachment, and when we don't have attachment that's proper echad, we will seek it out sometimes in unhealthy ways. What they call all addictions are essentially attachment disorder. You're attached to the wrong thing. So the idea of Hashem Echad and Shema, especially in all the prayers, we say it every day, but especially on Yom Kippur, when we say it, and then we say the next line, Baruch Shem, loud, we're essentially declaring that we are looking for the unifying principle, the unifying element that connects all the fragments of our lives. And every one of us can meditate on that in our own particular way. So the Shema is that type of power. And if remember, I said the fifth level of the soul is called what? Yechida, oneness, singularity. It's finding that one connection that connects all the details. So think of it like a cosmic symphony where you have so many different musical notes and musical instruments, but they all join. It's the harmony within the diversity, which is the beauty of all real experiences. We're not looking for clones. We're looking for a harmony that connects all the dots and all the details. That's in a way, the essence of what the Shema is all about.
So this has all been great. You've covered an incredible amount of material. Is there a closing kind of statement you want to make and again, not to put it together, but to leave us as we go and embark on the holiday?
My preference would be to hear from everybody because I love to interact and the feedback, but I understand that we can't really do that. So look, I'll say this. I would love to meet everyone individually, but being that we're here, I want to say this. I want the emphasis of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is the indispensability, the value that each of you have, your dignity. There's nothing more dignified than the idea that God put you on this earth and that you have something unique to contribute, that you and only you can contribute. To me, if that's the takeaway that we take away from Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that's a success. You have something to contribute that only you can contribute. I can't do it for you, you can't do it for me. And in that process, we all complement each other. I mentioned the Cosmic Symphony. I'm always touched by the tragic poem of Oliver Wendell Holmes called The Voiceless, where he says, alas, to those that die with their song still inside them. You hear that? Alas, to those that die with their song still inside them. You have a song inside you, many songs, and you want to make sure you sing that song. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur gives us the courage, the power to sing your unique song. Or as some say, you were born an original, don't become a copy. Rosh Hashanah is this declaration of your originality. Now, obviously, we have much in common, and we need to work with each other. But working with each other is also recognizing the individual power. So I feel honored, and I thank you again, Mark, and David, and everyone involved for making this happen. I feel honored to be able to be here with divine souls that we can cross-pollinate, and we can synchronize, and we can synergize, and create something that's more than the sum of the parts. And I invite you all, I'd love to be able to stay in touch if you want to continue discussing anything that was touched upon. Mark can give you ways to reach me if you need that. And let's, so I most importantly, I want to conclude with a blessing that everybody should be blessed, be written and sealed in the book of life, Ksiva v'chasima tova, Shana tova, and metuka, a sweet year. And even the challenges should also be transformed into opportunities, all in good health, abundance beyond your wildest imagination, materially and spiritually. And may you fulfill, you and your families, your unique mission in illuminating and spiritualizing your corner of this world.